is Friday, November 18th, 2011, and we do have a full quorum today to include Trustee Graves, Trustee Bates, Trustee Nurge, and myself. Actually, Trustee Binion was not able to make it today. And he's actually representing us over at the state football finals in Pocatello. So it's a good place to be. But I would like to call the meeting to order. Today, I'll first ask if there are any additions, corrections, or modifications or substitutions to the current agenda. And there are none. So again, I will call the meeting to order. And today, we're pleased to have the Blaine County Drug Coalition. And I think introductions are in order. And so I'll start at the far left with Mr. Bailey, if you wouldn't mind standing and introducing yourself.
I'm Tom Bailey. I'm the president of Blaine County Drug Coalition, and I want to show you.
Yeah.
That's good. Thanks.
I want to thank you for allowing us to come before you and present this information that we think is obviously it's our huge mission and technical stuff. It's our main mission, and we've been involved in this for the past going on 6 years. And I'd like to introduce some of the members of the board. I'll name all of them, but most of the board is present here. Myself as president. Walt Femling is the vice president. Walt's not with us. Larry Schoen is our treasurer. Teresa Espedal, who represents probation, is our secretary. Aaron Paffley, who's with us, works with St. Luke's Community Outreach, and we have a huge partnership with St. Luke's and the Drug Coalition that is very intertwined and large sponsorship from them. And Larry Schoen is our treasurer. Welcome, Larry.
You have two of them?
Jim Thomas is also part of our board. Dave Stone out of the Auto Club. And then Father Sean Carty is part of it. And then Nancy Nealon, who's also present this afternoon. We started off, like I said, about 6 years ago because there was as a response to a huge problem of drug addiction at the alternative school. And that was the first call to order for the community. And at that time, the superintendent, Jim Lewis, asked me to put together kind of a task force to investigate the issue. And out of that, we brought together multiple entities from the community. And from that, it was very much apparent that there was a larger problem than just at the alternative school. And that group of people, which many of them are still involved today on the board or through membership, has now grown to where we have multiple agencies involved. Come on in, fathers. Father Sean is here. And our budget runs close to $700,000 from a little nothingness, a lot of hard work and a lot of efforts put in through grants, etc. And we now actually have a working component of 4 full-time employees, and I'll let Terry Basillo speak to those and introduce them in their prospective job issues. But again, we think that this is a major concern in the Valley, and our mission is to move forward to improve the health of the Valley, especially the at-risk youth of our Valley. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Terry Basillo, who is the director for our coalition. Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Before you begin, Terry, go ahead. You step. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that during these special workshops, and that it's more of an open, informal environment. So feel free to raise your hands, and I'll pick you out of the crowd, and feel free to ask questions or make comment. So.
Excuse me, but I forgot 2 important members of our board. We have student representation on our board. Cayetana Martinez represents for the high school, and so does Mr. Tommy Bailey. And he is present today in case you have questions to ask as we get forward from youth perspective. So we feel we need that youth perspective since we're working with youth. We can't make all the decisions for them. We need their input. So I forgot my own son.
All right, again, my name's Terry Basoldo, and I'm the Executive Director of the Drug Coalition, and I too want to welcome everyone and thank the Board of Trustees hugely. I think it's so exciting and appreciated that you all have selected as one of your strategic priorities this year, along with the administration, to focus on drug and alcohol substance abuse issues in the community and work more closely with the Drug Coalition. So we're here to help, and this is a great opportunity today to talk a little bit about the structure of who we are, what we do, but I know the real interest is to look at, what is the latest substance abuse data, so we're going to go right into that, talk a little bit about some of the programs and things that we do. It will be kind of interactive. I'm going to involve two of our 3 full-time employees in the presentation today. Jay Hedrick is with us. Jay, say waiver. He's our new project coordinator for the Drug-Free Community Grant, and that's a large grant out of the White House Office of Drug Policy, and it's focused more on environmental strategies than actual projects, and we'll speak to that a little bit later in the presentation. We also have David Horace with us today. David is a licensed professional counselor, and he runs our Idaho Drug-Free Youth Program, both at the middle school and the high school, and we're in the process of developing a group counseling program for high-risk youth, which we'll speak about a little bit more as well. And although she won't be presenting, she's just as important. I want to welcome another new staff member, Andrea Walton. And Andrea is our development coordinator, so she primarily works on our Sun Valley Road Rally, which is our big annual fundraiser, and then she also works on our with our donors and grant writing. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started.
Please do.
Next slide, please, Lori, if you would. Thanks for the help. So getting right into substance abuse reporting, as you know or may not know, we have been collecting the data every year in conjunction with the district as a partnership since I started this job a little over 3 years ago. So we have, you'll see on this slide, and I'll kind of explain it, and the other ones will follow a similar format. But to not get too exhaustive in data, because our time is short today and there are other things I know we want to look at, we thought that 30-day alcohol use and marijuana use are probably the 2 biggest indicators. They're the 2 substances we're the most focused on. And so we're going to give you some data on 6th graders, 8th graders, 10th graders, and 12th graders over the past couple of years. So on the bottom of the screen, you'll see Haley 2008. We're looking at 6th graders now. And then on to 2011, this last year's data that the students completed in May, spring of last year. We didn't have 2009 data from the 6th grade. And then we have Cary data sort of in the middle. And then all the way over here to the end, we have Idaho data, the last time that Idaho collected data on substance abuse. And the reason for that is that was funded by the Safe and Drug-Free School funding, which, as you guys all know, has gone away. So we're struggling at the state level to continue to get data. So pretty minor data on this one. You can just see that we do show an increase in 1 to 2 time use. This is how many times they've used alcohol in the last 30 days. So 1 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 9, and 10. And the other caution I'd give you that I always try and remember to share when we're giving presentations on data is it's really easy to want to trend this data and look at, it's going up or it's going down based on where it was a year ago compared to where it is today. Really important, I think, to keep in mind that they're separate cohorts. So sometimes it happens, as probably no one knows better than you all, that there can be a group that for whatever reason there seems to be more issues than the prior year or the next year. Next slide, Lori. Thanks. So 30-day marijuana use for 6th graders, and again, it's almost non-existent both at the state level and in 6th grade we show 1%, and less, only 1 to 2 times in the last 30 days on the most recent data. Next slide, please.
Terry, may I interrupt for a second?
Anytime, please.
When was the survey taken?
May
of
2011.
May of 11. Okay.
And we do we rotate the surveys. Dr. Barber and I and the coalition have had some discussions about what's the most valuable way to collect this data. So our approach is every other year we do the climate, substance abuse, and climate data survey, which is where this information is off of, and then in the off years we do what's called the Search Institute's Developmental Asset Survey, which on top of gathering the substance abuse data also gathers data on protective factors and risk factors. I'm sure you've probably heard, are familiar with that survey. The concept being the healthiest child has 40 assets, and a child that has 20 or more is deemed to be a pretty healthy young person, and those assets decline over time. So a sixth grader will have a higher number in the mid-20s typically, and those will start to scale down towards a senior year. 30-day use then here for eighth graders of alcohol. Again, same slide with the dates across the bottom and the different schools and how many times. And one of the concerns, although slight, but we're looking at only eighth graders, is that, compared to, say, 2009, this is sort of a trending down. Students that are drinking more and more times in a given month for us here in Blaine County is going up. And I'll kind of remind you all the way through these to kind of look at this aggregate number. So say 23% in 2011 in Blaine County versus the 15% statewide. Another piece of information that I have looked at, national data up and through 2010, and it's pretty consistent with state data. So as a rule, Idaho follows pretty closely to what's happening nationally. Next slide, please. Eighth graders now, marijuana use, and you can see that the trend here is, in the aggregate, the numbers are not that far from prior years, but we do show a pretty high number of students showing 10 or more times as eighth graders using marijuana in the last 30 days, and much higher than state numbers. Next slide, please, Lori. 10th grade alcohol use, as you'd expect, and within any district or a community, the numbers start to go up as the students get older. And here, again, the trends are concerning that overall our numbers are higher in 2011 for our 10th grade class. This is a pretty tough-looking cohort, I have to tell you, compared to prior years when looking at substance abuse data. But you can see pretty heavy, high-frequency usage in the last 30 days and a lot higher than, again, state level. Next slide, please.
Those are the
Sure.
That would be our current junior class.
That's current.
That's right. That's correct, John. All right, so now 10th grade marijuana use, and again, kind of along the same lines with this cohort, the numbers jump pretty dramatically over the 2009 data, and really, phenomenally higher, I would say, than state levels. And this is where you'll hear the Drug Coalition, different board members, or myself in a presentation talk about, what are the rates like, and we'll say, well, when you look at alcohol and marijuana use in the community, we tend to be anywhere from time and a half to double rates compared to the state or the nation, and in fact, in some cases, and here's one, more so.
Terry, I need to understand.
Sure.
So is it a cumulative at 12, 8, 7, and 16?
No, they would check one or the other. So they're cumulative in that this would say that 43% here of the students of that cohort have smoked marijuana in the last 30
That's
days.
what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, you're
Thank
correct.
you. Yeah.
Sorry about that. So moving on to the 12th grade, then 30-day alcohol use. These numbers, there's actually, if you look at it on the aggregate and the frequency of use, there's a slight improving trend, I would say, over the prior year. But again, we're 44% for the state overall, and in 2011 in Blaine County, we're 66%. I've been using alcohol in the last, so 2/3 of the class reports using alcohol in the last 30 days. Next slide, please. 30-day marijuana use. Again, overall, we're about in the same place. We do, well, that's what I say. From 2009 to 2010, it's not dissimilar, but much, much higher than the state level. And there's kind of an interesting, and you'll see this, I think, as I show you a couple other slides as well. It seems as though our alcohol use when these kids are younger maybe is a little bit ahead of the state and the nation in rates, but then there seems to be this switch over to where drugs sort of takes the place of alcohol more so than the state group or the national group. And when you ask students what drugs, what that is, for the most part, it's marijuana. So, next slide, please, Lori. The students were asked, is there a drug or alcohol problem among kids attending your school? And there's 4 possibilities. Yes, a lot of kids are using drugs or alcohol. Some kids are. No, only a few kids are. Or no one uses drugs or alcohol. And again, you can see that the numbers overall of students that say they're not using anything state compared to our community as seniors or 10th graders, it all is fairly similar. What concerns me, I guess, the most in this slide, and there's a lot of information, it's a lot of information in one question, frankly, but is looking at, there's a big difference in my mind between, yes, a lot of kids are using drugs and alcohol, or yes, some kids are. And you'll see, to look at, well, let's go to that 10th grade cohort again. We have 50% are reporting that, yes, a lot of kids are, versus at the state level, 30%. So almost double. And then going to the senior class, 54% say that, yes, a lot of kids are using drugs and alcohol, versus 34% at the state level. I always think this is an interesting place to interject that, when we talk to students and ask them what they're reporting as substance abuse personally, and then ask them the same question about what their peers are doing, and this happens locally, at the state level, nationally, perception is always higher than reality. So these numbers may in fact be higher, but I think the important point to remember, they also are at the state level. So that ratio is going to stay the same. Does that make sense? Okay, next slide, please. We asked the students, is there drug or alcohol use during the day at school? And yes to alcohol, yes to drugs, being the next color over. The darker red, orange color, yes both, and the blue, no. And the numbers are not, as far as students that say there isn't use during the day, we're not that different from the state level. But again, as the students get older in age, you can see here ask about yes drugs. Our seniors reported last year 37% that there was drugs at school versus the state level 19%. Alcohol is actually 4% for the state, and ours is only 1%. Now, there's a combination, so you have to kind of evaluate a couple of things on that slide, but it seems as though that students indicate that the drug issue is more significant, especially as they get older.
So is this from the May survey? It says 2000, but then what's the Blaine 08?
The Blaine is, so it's 6th grade Blaine in 2011, 8th grade Blaine 2011, and so on. And then the last time we have the state data is 08. So
I get, I'm sorry, I didn't
There's a lot of
understand
data, I
that.
apologize, it's just the way I asked the
I thought
question.
it was Blaine 08, Blaine 08, that's what I was, so the state data is from 08. But
Correct.
But the Blaine
Is
is from
current,
11.
is 2011,
Okay.
right. Yep.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Oh, it's there? Is there drinking or drug use at most parties that you attend? Yes, there's alcohol at the parties. Yes, there's drugs. Yes, both. No, I don't attend parties. And same set of data. And again, the things that, certainly some concerning numbers over here, that students are saying, yes, there's alcohol even in 6th grade versus the state, more so than drugs. And again, to my point, so the alcohol is more prominent and more so locally than at the state level. But then as we get to 10th graders and to seniors, you'll see that the drug piece is the more prominent response. So that, make sure I'm looking at the right one. So yes, both for 10th graders is 55% locally, whereas it's only 21% at the state level, so 2.5 times the rate. 56% for seniors versus 31% at the state level, almost double. Next slide, please. All right, so that's a snapshot of data. We obviously have a lot of detail that we can go into with all of those, but due to time constraints, I think that hopefully gives you sort of a snapshot of one of the key components that we're required to measure for our grants, and really I think it's a value metric in trying to determine what sort of situation we have in our schools. As far as the Drug Coalition and how we operate, we just to give you a little background on our structure, we don't just get together as a concerned board over these last 4 or 5 years and talk about the situation and look at the data and try and figure out strategies. We really do this in a methodical process that's driven by this strategic prevention framework that SAMHSA provides for us. So we really are focused on making sure that we have good data, whether that's actual numeric data or narrative data, capacity. We look at, make sure that, and that's the reason we've been so focused these last few years on trying to build our budget and our size so we have the ability to have adequate staff and programs to be able to implement the different strategies. The planning pieces, that the part that follows is looking at our logic model, which truly drives our strategic plan, which I'm going to briefly touch on. And then, of course, implementing those different programs and policies. The evaluation piece is the next step, and we actually will be bringing in an evaluator probably at the end of 2012 to look at our programs and our strategies and help us look at the outcomes and see if, in fact, all this effort that we're doing is making a difference. And then underlying this five-step process is sustainability and cultural competence, so that we're focused on making sure we can be sound enough to continue so that we can do this work for the long haul, because unfortunately it's not going to go away. And then the cultural competence piece is to make sure that for our community we're thoughtful about the entire community and how we make a difference in all aspects of that. You can think of this wheel as sort of ongoing. It's just we have to continue to look at all of these steps. Next slide, please. I'm not going to spend hardly any time on this. You'll be pleased to know. But it is important for a couple of reasons. It's the logic model approach that we've decided as a board to follow, and it's driven by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration and how they would recommend a coalition operates. So the only things I'm going to point out on here, this is our logic model that the coalition operates by for our strategic plan based on alcohol. We need to have one of these for every drug that we're working on. So in other words, in this slide, alcohol use is the primary focus. We have another one of these that we'll create for marijuana. If we decided we wanted to tackle prescription drugs and so on, we'd need to continue to create these. We look at, in this case, the board feels like, and stakeholders in the organization, the problems, the root causes in Blaine County, or there's a low perception of risk by youth about substance abuse, and that there's high availability. The thing about each of these red boxes, if you will, is we have to make sure that we have good metrics. We have data, at least two pieces of data on each one to measure. So over time, these programs and things that we work on, we can try and figure out if, in fact, we're making a difference. It then moves over to the local conditions, so we spend a lot of time talking about different things that are happening in the community and trying to identify strategies that we can measure that will make a difference. And in this case, this is just an example of, we've been talking about parents providing alcohol and other drugs at parties. And there's a policy that a lot of communities implement known as a social host ordinance. So we've had a lot of discussion around that, and this is a sample of sort of the strategies we might use for that if we were going to try and implement social host strategies within the various cities and the county. Next slide, please. Just wanted to give you a little bit of a sense. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but as far as the environmental strategies versus the programs that the coalition is engaged in, these top four are what we consider to be environmental strategies, and we'll talk in another place a little bit about some of the key programs we're doing. These other ones down here would tend to be more programmatic, and then we also break them down by whether we're impacting prevention, treatment, or enforcement. A couple words on environmental strategies versus programs. Environmental strategies you can think of as sort of affecting the whole community. So as an example, the alcohol compliance work that the coalition has done has been going out into the community to make sure that underage youth can't buy alcohol. That's been researched and studied and proven that if it's done in a proper way, it will reduce supply, and that over time changes community outlook and lower substance abuse rates by kids. So we're currently we're doing the task to compliance checks, as you know. We're discussing social host ordinance. We are in the process of working on some curriculum pieces, which I'll get to, and talk about these programs in another place. So thanks, Lori. And this is a perfect segue into that then. So the curriculum piece is the Mendez Foundation curriculum that the Drug Coalition has purchased, along with some support from Blaine County Probation. There's two curriculums, actually. There's one called the Too Good for Drugs program and one called Too Good for Violence. Thanks to Tom at Haley Elementary and Brad at Woodside Elementary, they're both piloting both of those curriculums with their PE teachers and with their social workers. And they're an evidence-based curriculum. They're 8 weeks. There's one module per week for one class period. And it's, again, they're evidence-based programs. They've been studied, they've been evaluated, they've gone through that sort of rigor, and they're listed on the National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs as most promising. So it's really the best thing that we can find, and we feel like that the drug and alcohol piece, as well as the violence and bullying piece, which are so interrelated, that if we could get a good experience and get those into the schools, it truly is an opportunity early to teach prevention and education and hopefully lower our substance abuse rates. I'll let Tom and Brad say a couple comments about those if they'd like, but I think the hope of Dr. Barber and the coalition has been that if, in fact, those are successful, we could look at expanding them to all of the elementary schools and into the middle school. It actually goes all the way into the high school, and of course they're age appropriate. But one of the challenges, of course, is the district is a very ambitious, and I think, and I'm proud of that, district in having a lot of different initiatives and a lot of things going on, and it's very difficult to find time for teachers or the schools to implement, one additional curriculum, and so that's some of the things that we're sort of looking at to see ways that we might accomplish that. Tom, do you want to add anything on that?
We implemented it through the health program because that's one of the specialists, through the PE program because it deals with their health. Once a month I meet with what we refer to as our leadership team at Haley Elementary, and that's made up of 4th and 5th graders who represent their class and come in for a lunch with myself, and we go over issues and how to make things better, etc. And actually just yesterday I met with them and asked them to give me feedback on this program that they'd experienced. And every one of them was very, very positive about it. They said that, especially my 5th graders, they gave a very mature response in the fact that they said, we know we're going to be facing these issues soon, so we're glad we're having some discussion now and learning how to deal with it. And it's all about, the main focus of the program is about good decision making, which is what you want any child to have when they're faced with the choice of drug or alcohol use. And so they were very, very positive in their response. They know that it's an important issue. The 4th graders liked the interaction piece, liked the way it was presented, but the 5th graders really took it to heart that these are some hard decisions that they're going to have to make. And I was very proud of their response to that. So that's just a very brief evaluation of the program, but it comes from the horse's mouth, which is excellent in my regard. So, you want to say anything, Brad?
Sure. I think is what. Well, first the coalition sponsored the teachers to go to a training in Atlanta, which was really fantastic for them to go and have a 2-day training, and to have great discussions. And both Craig and Patty and Carlos and Terry, when they came back, they were very excited about it. The other thing that's cool is that they're doing it even though they're working closely together, Patty and Craig are doing it very differently. Terry and Carlos are doing it differently, based on our schedule. They're taking advantage of the fact they don't have a gym right now, and Patty's, she's doing it all right now. Each of the I think there are actually 10 units in that particular curriculum. Whereas Craig, we're going to start after Thanksgiving, and he's going to do it once a week for the next So we'll have some great opportunities for them to have dialogue, to then look at the 2 different ways they've done it, to see what would be the best way to implement it within the district. The thing that I kept hearing, and it was so great because Tom and I also went to the training, was that it's that preventative piece. It's not, oh look, you're already doing it, what can you do now to stop it? But it's that preventative piece that starts in kindergarten, and it builds and builds and builds and builds, and it's got characters that go throughout it. It's got so they're hearing the same vocabulary, the same lessons, the same terms of use that they can of how to stop it or how to interact with it. And so it's neat that we're doing it, and I think it's going to be positive. So
Thank you.
The next piece program that we're working on that I think there's some great opportunity for collaboration is the high-risk one-on-one mentoring program. We actually just met as a board yesterday to discuss this and what the next steps would be. We're going to form a task force. We really would love to have a champion or two from the school district to work with us on that. And I'll give you a little sense of the concept of what the program would be. It's by no means approved at this stage, but I think that I can speak for the board that there was some really positive energy yesterday that if we can develop something that's functional, I think it has the potential to be affordable and really make a difference. The concept would be, briefly, it would mirror the Big Brothers Big Sisters one-on-one mentoring program. The only difference would be instead of it being voluntary where a young person and a parent is interested to have an adult mentor in the community, this would be a mandatory mentoring piece. And we probably wouldn't be able to take the most high-risk students. There would probably be some cases where they wouldn't fit, and there would be a whole protocol and a process to interview the parent, the teen, and the adult to make sure that they were appropriate for the program and that the adult was appropriate for that young person. But based on our experience at the Drug Coalition of funding and starting Big Brothers Big Sisters, which unfortunately folded, Boise decided they didn't want to continue to fund the chapter here, which we were a satellite of Boise's operation. We learned a great deal, and Bronwyn Patterson, who ran that program, would be very interested to run a similar program on a high-risk basis. So we decided yesterday as a board that we would form this task force with a social worker, a counselor. We'd again like to have some school district champions, but the concept would be that if you were to have a suspended or an expelled student and you wanted as part of that process to get them back into the school system, you could require them to take part in a program like this. The age spread would be 10 to 17. And we would also, the other primary feeder, if you will, for this would be Blaine County Probation, who's also, Teresa's not here today, but she's also very interested in that sort of a program. And you can jump in at any point and ask me questions on these, but I'm just going to go through them. Trustee Graves?
So would that be with a staff member then?
Absolutely.
It wouldn't be like the Big Brothers Big Sisters, the volunteers. It would be with a
No, I'm
trained
sorry.
staff member.
It would be it's a good question. It would be definitely with community volunteers. It's a very, Big Brothers Big Sisters model requires a lot of almost social worker type follow-up to make sure that on an ongoing basis the volunteer is happy, the big, if you will, and the little, and as well as the parent. So there would be that sort of follow-up, but it would be volunteers. And one of the things we learned in Blaine County that's maybe a little different than in Boise, the mentors who did do Big Brothers Big Sisters here really expected that the students they would be working with would be a little bit higher need, let's say, than what actually a lot of the students who were interested. It also tended to be a little bit of a younger age than what you'd experience in other communities, a lot more third, fourth, and fifth graders, not so many middle school age students. So it has some complexities. Obviously, a lot of things immediately come to your mind about the insurance pieces and the rest of it. But I think we have enough experience. I think we could build a model with the right professionals sort of helping us look at it. And I think it could be a really nice piece to helping these kids kind of, get back on track.
So would the mentors be, professionals doing sort of pro bono work, or would they be your average?
They would be parents. They would be people in the community that were interested to do it, adults. We would have it probably would require some additional training than what a typical mentor might in Big Brother, Big Sister. But we don't see that. I don't see that at least as being incredibly excessive. But it would be more. There'd be an initial training process.
So it wouldn't be as much counseling or drug and alcohol counseling.
It would just be a friend. It would be more of an adult to be involved in their life because research shows additional adults can really make a difference and build those protective factors and reduce risk factors.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
When's the rollout on that?
Well, we're going to form this task force right away. We recognize we wouldn't be able to approve it at our January annual meeting, but I think the hope of the board was if it's a model that we'll bring a business proposal to the board. If it looks like something that the board is interested in, I would hope March maybe, something like that. Does that sound close? The next program then is the communication parent education, and we have partnered on the gathering of the data, which is the next piece, but also in communicating to through the paper what our self-reporting data looks like, some of the issues in the community, and I feel like we've had a great partnership. Actually, Heather and I are going to spend some time after this meeting talking about some of the latest data and how we can potentially communicate that through Partners in Ed as well as through the newspapers. One of the things that we always struggle with is how to get to those parents. And you guys sometimes have more of a captive audience a couple times a year with, say, the brand new freshmen or the brand new sixth graders. It's really difficult sometimes to get to parents, to get them the information about, propensity for addiction rates that's so much worse as the kids are younger, the latest science on the brain and why it's not a good idea to be, condoning alcohol use or allowing it to happen in the home, those kinds of things. The next piece that I think is a real interesting collaborative piece is the, oops, that's all right, is the high-risk counseling, and that's a group counseling piece that we're also working on developing with probation and David, and I'm going to let him say a little bit about that piece and some of his work at Idaho Drug Free Youth.
Hello, so I'm David, and I'm the youth program coordinator for the Blaine County Drug Coalition. So first of all, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Idaho Drug Free Youth. Idaho Drug Free Youth started actually up in Coeur d'Alene about 10 to 15 years ago, and it has been a program that continues to grow. IDFI is a program that generates this idea of creating a counterculture to this idea that it's cool to do drugs. And this idea of wanting to be part of the crowd. We really want to change that perception. So there's two things that IDFI really focuses on: drug testing and protective factors. So the drug testing piece, to become a member of Idaho Drug Free Youth, you have to do a drug test. So all the students that we have, 80 to 100 members, have all done an initial drug test. After that piece occurs, every month we do 10% of the population of our members. And so that continues to keep up the idea that you could be drug tested at any time, and that gives the kids, first of all, an out to be like, I'm part of this club. I don't want to have to use, because this is something I want to be a part of. And in the idea that, as well as with the drug testing, once they do the drug test, they're able to participate in a lot of interesting activities. And a lot of those activities are important through the idea of protective factors. So some of those protective factors that have actually been researched and shown to actually help with determining if kids will either use or not use. And some of those factors are positive peer relationships, social emotional intelligence, communication, self-control, problem solving, drug resistance skills, strengthening anti-drug attitudes and personal commitments against drug use, follow-up programs through high school, peer discussion, being part of a community, and the idea of parental control and disapproval of actual drug use. So a lot of our activities and programs really focus on those protective factors. So we have everything going on from, we just went to the IDFI Leadership Retreat, which is put on by the Idaho Drug Free Youth program from Coeur d'Alene. It was just up here at Cathedral Pines. So this idea of these kids can come together, there's no judgment, they're there to be a part of this program, there's full acceptance. So that positive peer relationship is something that's really, really important. They also put together this program called the Idaho Youth Summit, which happens in June, where all members, as well as people who are kind of interested in IDFI, can go to this retreat. Now, that happens up in Coeur d'Alene, and we've seen 300 to 400 members show up there and all come together about caring for each other and really being able to accept everyone for who they are. And lastly, we're looking at going to Washington, D.C., sending 3 members to go to the National CADCA Conference, Drug and Alcohol Conference, really deals with coalition work. And how can our high school members really participate in that? So we're really trying to develop this counterculture that can generate this idea of safety, this idea of walking the talk. We say we're drug-free, but let's actually show it. and the kids actually are really okay about doing the drug tests. I have middle school kids coming up to me and say, I want to do a drug test this week. And when their test comes up negative, they're like, could you write a note for me? Show my parents. Because they want to show that to their parents that they are drug-free. One thing we do in the idea of the high-risk counseling, I've been really focusing on the idea of trying to get something going in the sense of counseling. So I'm working with the probation program to develop a high-risk counseling group that would be an 8 to 10 week session, and so our population would be coming from the probation program. I'm going to be using a SAMHSA National Registry program that is shown to be validated and actually works. So that's something I'm really going to be focusing on, and hopefully starting up this next semester, get something like that going with collaboration with the probation program. So it's been really productive. We went from last year only having about 2 members to now having up to almost 100.
Wow.
So, yes.
What about that high-risk counseling, having some sort of collaboration with the school district too? Is that another part? I mean,
Yes.
along with the mentoring, those 2 pieces seem to be pretty big that we could,
Yeah, go ahead, Terry.
Yeah.
work with the coalition.
Absolutely.
Because
I think
sometimes
that-
we might need
I think you're fine. I think that's a great opportunity for collaboration as well. And so definitely, again, we'd like to have a champion or 2 from the district to work with us on developing this as we work with probation, because we see the 2 logical places that students would come from, if you're interested, could be, again, this expelled, suspended group of students, potentially some other high-risk students that you all might identify. And, a couple things we're doing with that that I think are really important that I didn't mention. One, with the one-on-one mentoring, if we undergo that program and this group counseling piece, is we would have a metric tied to it. We're able to use the Search Institute's Developmental Asset Survey. They have a different version of that that's a micro version that can be used on one student or a small group of students that David would actually be giving these students. He's going to start doing it as well with the IDEFI students, so that we know how many developmental assets they're reporting when they come into these given programs. And then over a year period, we'd give them a post survey to try and identify, are we at least leveling those off, or in a really wonderful scenario, are they actually starting to increase a little bit? So yes, we'd love to work with you on that.
So Steve was asking about a timeline sort of for the mentoring program. Are you thinking next spring for the counseling, or is that?
That's what
Is that-
that's
yeah,
what we're hoping for.
for the spring.
At this point, we have working quite closely with Teresa, and I have everything pretty much set up at this point. We just need to get to the idea of what that process is going to look like, of how those students are going to come from probation and then come to me. And so that's an idea of doing an intake to make sure these people are appropriate for doing a group, first of all, because you don't want someone who is maybe at the point of maybe needs like an inpatient thing versus someone who's tried every once in a while. So you really want to make sure the population fits the group.
Right. And do you foresee there being a cost to something like this?
No.
Not at this point.
No. No, we'd be able to offer it at this stage. Thanks to having David on staff, we could offer it at no charge.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Terry and David, you all communicate with administration, Dr. Barber.
Yeah.
This could really be a benefit.
And we'd love to. I mean, I hate to even ask because I know how much volunteer time, I don't even know, but I have a sense of how much volunteer time you guys contribute. I think it would be really exciting if we could even ask for one of you as trustee members to consider being on that task force. But certainly we'll communicate with Dr. Barber and talk about some different people that might be involved.
I have just a couple of comments. I think they're comments. They might be questions. So, David, the IDEFI, as I understand, is primarily administered by students. Is that correct? So it's student-run?
Yeah. So at this point, what really happens is it's the idea of ownership. So these students take ownership of the program. So they are able to discuss. We have our meetings. We usually have, for the high school group, we have meetings, and then we have activities once a month. So they're able to come together, and then they discuss what type of activities they want to participate in. They come together and they talk about, hey, how about we do this for the community? So that's something that I'm there to really help facilitate whatever they're interested in participating in. And so that's a nice thing. It's not like a top-down. I want this club to be something they're interested in, doing the activities they want to do. And so it's more of this ownership that, hey, this is a cool thing to be a part of.
Including recruiting.
Yeah, including
Yeah.
recruiting. Actually, all of our recruiting generally happens through word of mouth.
Mhm.
You know, and we might have an activity like we went down to NASCAR carts the other week. And we had a couple of people say, hey, I have a friend that really wants to participate in that. Can I bring him?
Mm.
I was like, yeah. So all of a sudden we have another new member, and we're going to do a drug test with that new member at our next meeting. I do a lot of communication on Facebook with the high school students, as well as texting, because that's just that's the easiest way to get a hold of them. So.
You know, and one thing I do want to just, it's so important, something that you touched on a bit was that, because I've had past experience with this and it works, is that, you know, the voluntary drug testing, you know, there are a lot of benefits to that, but I think the biggest benefit to that is that exactly what you said. It gives kids a reason to say no or a way out. You know, if they're subject to random drug tests, when they're under pressure from peers, you know, they can simply say either that, you know, I'm with IDEFI and I'm subject to random drug tests, or that may even happen at home. You know, so I don't want to take that lightly. I think that's a really, really big benefit to your program.
Yeah. I mean, I even did just recently, I like to do an evaluation every year with our students just to see what they want different from the program. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them is that one question I asked was, why are you part of IDEFI? And most of the answers I got back is because I want to out, or I don't want to use drugs. And so they're now seeing it as a safe place. And that's a wonderful thing to see, that it's this place to belong, this place to be safe and not have to worry about, you know, I have to use drugs to be a part of this group.
Who administers the drug testing?
I actually do the drug testing as well.
Okay.
So
How many members do you have?
80 to 100 members. In the middle school group, we have about
80 to 100?
Uh-huh. So 80 to 100 generally means we have members throughout that are part of all the programs throughout the year. But they're also in sports, they're also in drama, they're also in a lot of different things. So our program, the nice thing about our program is, you know, if you have sports and you can't come to the meetings, that's okay. You know, when you are able to have an open time to come back, we are open and we're fully accepting of that. So it really gives them an opportunity to just be, you know, well, I'm focusing on wrestling right now. So right now in the middle school group, we have about 50, and our high school group is around 35 up to 40.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So then the last piece that we, you know, wanted to have a little discussion regarding today. It's always a challenging and topical conversation is around drug testing, and we have certainly worked with, you know, IDEFI is really great because we have a really nice system, a process, a protocol around mandatory testing. And we've worked with the Sun Valley Ski Education Foundation on a limited basis. We haven't gotten as far with that as we'd like, just due to busy schedules, and it's a lot to pull together. But there's a definite interest there to have a more rigorous testing program and make sure that it's more sound and actually the testing component of it, not just actually what the bylaws state as part of the code of ethics and the program. And there's a lot of other, you know, communities, school districts and things that are doing drug testing, some voluntarily, but a lot mandatory. And so I wanted to introduce Jay Hedrick and have him talk about after Larry's song finishes.
My kids' school with my phone.
You know,
That's what
I think there's a $10 fine.
Yeah, that's a fine. I'm going to use that excuse next
I'm
time.
restricting fortune.
You put it in the cup and you're,
Yeah.
when you go back.
Sorry. My drug test.
So Jay has a couple comments about drug testing and some things that are happening regarding it, and then I'll speak to protocols around drug testing just a little bit, then we'll open it up for just conversation and questions.
Okay.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Larry.
Again, my name's Jay Hedrick, staff here with the Drug Coalition, and I'm real excited to be here. I feel like at this point in my career, I kind of have the dream job. I get to take a lot of personal values and a lot of things I've thought about this community over the years and perhaps put some of these ideas into policy when they go along the lines of the Drug Coalition's mission. So I'm thrilled to be here. I'm here as a staff member of the Drug Coalition, but I'm also here as a father of 2 boys and a husband, and this stuff matters to me. I'm not going to take a lot of time because I think the questions will be more beneficial than me standing up here talking. I just wanted to give a little introduction to drug testing. If you could hit the next slide. I am not a legal expert, but I put this slide up here and you can take a look at it just so we know that in 1995 it was ruled by the Supreme Court that drug testing was okay to do with our student athletes. 2002, it was expanded to include all extracurricular sports. Because I am not a legal expert, we are not going to spend time here. I just want it's a legal way to help reduce adolescents using drugs. We'll just move along. I don't want to spend time there. We better get going. This is a quote I do want you to take a minute to read. We have a problem at the high school, we have a problem at the middle school, and it was picked up in the presentation that Terry gave. We are 1.5, 2 times higher than the national average. And to me, the reason I put this up here is this is where I believe a child can wake up in the morning with no idea. He doesn't wake up with the plan that he's going to use marijuana for the first time. When we have a runaway drug problem, the unsuspecting can find himself using marijuana, alcohol for the first time, catch himself unprepared, and the cycle can begin. I'm not saying one-time use, there will be an addiction cycle, but when it is available and there's no, when it's readily available like that, this is where the problems occur. We can go on to the next slide right there. Drug testing, leading to that when we have a runaway drug problem, drug testing, and I want to be really clear on it, it's only a component of a broader, comprehensive anti-drug policy. Drug testing in itself will not stop a drug problem. It will not make a kid not use drugs forever. The goal of drug testing is, Chairman Guthrie brought it up, part of the purpose of drug testing is, we'll jump down to here, give a child, my child, a convenient way to say no. I do not want to do that. I'm involved with the football team. I'm involved with an extracurricular activity, whatever that may be. And I don't want to jeopardize that. I want to participate, and I'm just not going to do it. Another purpose, drug testing, it's really a kid-friendly thing because it will give us the ability to, if we have a child, one, to say no, but the other part, if there is an adolescent, a child who is struggling with these issues, it's going to be a way where maybe we can start getting some help for that kid. So we don't have the legal consequences. We don't have the social consequences. It's that middle group. We can go to the next one. Okay, one parent's view. This could be several parents' view. It happens to be a little bit of my view. I really like the way out. Kids need help out, sometimes saying no. Another thing with the drug testing is I've sat here as a parent through a couple high school sport stump speeches. We all get together at the high school, the coaches come out, they talk about we're not going to, there's a nice code of conduct that students have to sign, parents have to sign. Actually, I've had to do quite a bit of that over the years. And the coaches come out and they mean well. Absolutely do they mean well. That I've heard from different coaches, different sports, we want to change the reputation of Wood River. We are known as stoners. We are known as, and the list goes on and on. I think a drug testing policy helps put some teeth to the code of conducts we're all signing for our kids in extracurricular activities. And it gives the kids a little accountability. We listen to these speeches, we get excited, and then the night's over, and it's never brought up again until the kid's in trouble by the law. So it could add just a little bit of team spirit there with what our kids are signing to. I think we also, as parents in the community, owe it to our kids for a safe environment. They can participate in these extracurricular activities, and knowing that the people they're playing with are not, their performance is not affected by drugs. The other part, this will not be most likely their first drug test they'll ever take. I had to take a drug test to start with St. Luke's for this job. Our skies tend to be a little safer today. Pilots have to drug test. Our roads are safer today. It's drug testing. Drug testing goes on in the world. It's going to continue to go on. And I think it's something that these adolescents will have to get used to. Another thing I do want to say about drug testing, we're coming at it from a standpoint that this is for the kid. This is not meant to be punitive. This is not meant to punish the kid. This is a pro-kid policy. And I'm not sure if we have one more slide or not. We do. I put this up here, this slide. The study, you can kind of look at it. I think put enough of the article in there to really, so you can even get the full effect of the study. Why I put this slide here is the headline and where it's coming from, USA Today. 20 years ago, when I was working with adolescents in a different state, in a different environment, we didn't talk about how alcohol or marijuana, working with these kids, interfere with the development of a young brain. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I'm working in the Valley, a different environment, but with adolescents again. We did not talk about brain development, how early use can affect brain development. Today, it's all over the place. Facts, facts, facts. Kids' brains develop until 21, 25 years of age. Early use interferes with it. And I'm not going to go into those facts. What was interesting to me is it's become mainstream media. We are constantly hearing about early use affects our kids' development. It's a health issue, not a moral issue. Maybe one more slide. Facts everywhere. How early use gets in the way. That's the gist of it. If our kids can get through school drug-free, they will do better post-high school. And we can go on to one more.
Paul, has a question.
Jay,
Yes.
is there a component in this drug testing you're suggesting that it detects alcohol? There is? Well, Tom says no, Terry says yes.
The panels that we use do detect alcohol. Yes.
And does it have, what's the range on the detecting the alcohol? I mean, is it a week, a few days? Okay, it's shorter. Yeah, because one of the things that's coming to mind is, you know, without that alcohol testing component, you're going to get a bunch of stoners that buy a six-pack of beer on the weekend. I mean, that can still participate in these things that we theoretically drug testing for without consequence. They just move to a substance that's not being tested. I mean, kids do that.
And there's a
I
lot
know.
of there's a lot of different ways you can put a drug testing policy together that obviously.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that has to be a component of it, because alcohol is easier to get. I mean, I think it is.
Talk to some school districts
yeah.
where how they test, what they test for is random. So it could just be a breathalyzer. That could be, and you were drawn at random, show up for the test, and it's a breathalyzer, and that's it. So it can be set up multiple ways.
Okay, yeah, but I'm just, I keep hearing drug test, and that's just a portion of the problem.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Students will move, gravitate to whatever.
Whatever you get away with. I mean, it's human
And
nature.
that's where we could all work together to create a nice comprehensive policy and plan
Yeah.
that
You can build
has other
strategies within
components.
it.
Well, yeah, that's what I would. Yeah, I'd like to
Do you have a comment?
hear more
Please,
about that.
please identify yourself. Your name, please, for the record.
I'm sorry, Nancy Nealon.
Thank you.
There is an 80-hour alcohol test that is used by the drug court and probation. So, but it's a little bit, a great deal more expensive. You would not necessarily know that, but it's a great deal. But it's $25 per test, so it can be done as opposed to the breathalyzer, but it's not cost-effective.
Okay, so there are some strategies then.
Absolutely.
Great.
David?
Thank you.
And then, after looking at Terry's slide about the logic model, about how there are so many different things that you need to do for one issue. So for alcohol, for example, there's not one silver bullet. So yeah, we might do drug testing on one side, but then maybe we need like a social hosting as well, and maybe a couple other things to really, go full press on this. Because you're not just going to be able to do it just with drug testing. There's just a lot involved in it. It's really complicated.
And there's a lot of education involved.
Catherine?
Just because you brought this up, what is the social, I saw that up there on one of Terry's slides. What's the social host ordinance, or what's that?
It's a policy. It's been passed in other communities. Actually, Meridian and Boise have recently passed a version of social hosting. CAMI has also
Like the
passed-
county did pass this ordinance, or,
Well, this
or
is
the?
slightly different. It specifically addressed that it's a violation of law. If it's criminal, it can also be civil.
Okay.
So it can be just a fine, depending on how it's done. To host, to knowingly allow your property, whether that's an apartment, a rental property, a leased property, or an owned property, to have alcohol being served to minors on premises.
I had a question maybe more to John Blackman. Just me being a new board member with younger kids, I don't know this answer of what's our policy with what we're doing now.
Well, we don't have drug testing. You have a health and conduct code for the athletes. If a student is under the influence, because we ran through this, we put all our administrators through DRE recognition training so that they know how to see the signs of alcohol or drug use during the school day. So that's all in the eyes, and so that they can run a field sobriety test, because that's part of the first process. We can't ask a kid to pee in a cup until we have evidence or reasonable suspicion to believe that they're currently under the influence. We have no jurisdiction when they do off our campus. So if a student drinks on the weekend, if they're not an athlete, we have no jurisdiction. If they're drunk at school, we have jurisdiction. If they're smoking dope during school, or if they're in the classroom stone, we have jurisdiction. If they're smoking at night after school, we really don't have any jurisdiction. The problem you're going to run into that is not going to be the random drug testing if they're on a conduct code, because that is the piece that gives you jurisdiction off campus. So when an athlete signs a conduct code, they're saying that they're telling you that they're agreeing to stay clean, during their season on or off campus. So they've signed a contract in effect with the district. So that's what gives you that right to random test, is it gives you jurisdiction on campus. One thing that kind of concerns me a little bit with drug testing is that statistically, just so you know, our athletes have the lowest dropout rate. They're our highest achieving students. They are, to be involved in athletics and activities at the school level is shown to be one of the biggest positive affects on student academic performance and behavior. So I'm not sure if you're going after the wrong kids.
Yeah.
John, you're absolutely right, John. And we realize that. And I think if you look back at the slide with the latest expansion from the Supreme Court, it now says any student involved in any activities at school. So it's not, we're not just in on those. That means if they drive their car to school, it's a privilege to drive a car to school. You could drug test those kids randomly if you just to get a sticker to drive their car to school. Any activity that comes up. And if you look at the numbers, and Pete could probably give us some great, how many kids are involved in activities in our school of some form or another? What would you, just a rough guess, Pete?
I think in the fall we were close to 60% athletics and activities.
There you go. And so if you're talking chess club, you're talking band, you're talking choir, you're talking, not just our athletes, you're talking all activities involvement. And then you, like I said, you could expand it to even driving a car because you're looking at safe environment. What better safe environment than what you put behind the car?
That's a big piece of information right there.
Right.
And there are districts nationally that have used that as their approach.
Don?
I had one other follow-up question that was part of that first one. Do you guys have any data, statistics showing schools that have maybe reduced sports or activities and an increase, or schools that have increased the number of sports and activities and seeing drug and alcohol use decrease? Is there any data out there on that?
No, Trustee Nerge, I have not seen anything specifically like that. However, I think as sort of a corollary, certainly we do know, as was just stated, that the more activities that students engage in, the less likely they are to be involved in substance abuse. It doesn't certainly preclude it, and we all know we've had incidents in the community. We had a fairly famous by shot I mean hard liquor shot party for the football team a couple of years ago. So it's not as though, and I agree with your statement, that this, for the most part, it's a great group of kids that's staying away from this stuff, but it doesn't know boundaries. It finds its way into our sports teams, our clubs, our drivers, whatever you might want to look at.
And I was asking that, in the context of if we increase activities and we increase sports, will we start seeing positive results?
I think the key to your question would be if we could get that 40% of students in the fall that weren't engaged in a club or a sporting activity to engage. If it's a matter that 60% is simply doing more, I'm not sure that would be as effective as if you could get that 40% that doesn't participate to do so.
Well, and I think, too, if you look at what the data was showing us, and you compare it to what, we're saying 60% of our kids are involved in an activity, yet our data is still showing 40. We're 4 times the state average in some cases. So some of those kids and activities are clearly participating in those behaviors, whether they're in an activity.
And I'm not saying that they're not.
No,
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that statistically, they're also, the ones that stay in school, the ones that do academically well. So I'm a strong believer in activities, and I'm not saying that they're perfect angels or that they don't partake. Obviously, they do. And I've had to deal with that as a coach. But I was just worried that we weren't looking at all activities. I think Tom made a huge clarification for me right there. I mean, if you're talking about band and drama and debate, those are all actually sanctioned activities. And if you expand that to clubs and so forth, then I think you're hitting a lot broader spectrum and not really focusing on a smaller group.
There's a chance drug testing may keep a kid involved in activities as well, where, hey, I like this. I like that I can say, no, I'm going to stay with sports, and this is really working for me as far as walking through my high school years.
But I've also seen sports, I've seen it in my own experience, get kids, just the sport itself, get kids away from the drugs. So, because there is also peer pressure the other way. If your teammates are depending on you, and now all of a sudden I lost 8 players in one season due to a soccer drinking party and my kids stood up and were very honest with me, and it was one of my most successful days as a coach, because they volunteered that information. I didn't know if they were there or not. But it showed me a lot about their character, but they had to face their teammates, and believe me, it had a huge impact on all 6 of those individuals to this day about their own
Okay, Paul's up next.
Well, I think that the conduct codes that we've developed over the last several years for players and so on, I think the consequences that have been articulated in those agreements, I think, have gone a long ways toward being able to say no. I mean, my daughter plays soccer. A couple of years ago, one of the older girls got caught drinking. It was not around the field. I mean, it was another day, and she missed 2 games. My daughter was absolutely mortified. How could anyone possibly, for the sake of drinking a beer, tolerate missing 2 games? And I think that a lot of kids have really latched onto that, because I mean, I myself have observed a lot less illegal activity surrounding athletes during their seasons. I mean, I don't know what they do the rest of the time, but I can't disagree with John that how much resource are we putting into something where these kids are basically stronger and know what they're going to lose, do not want to let their teams down. I mean, it just kind of how much of the resource goes there, how much of the resource, and what is the resource that goes toward those who are potentially more at risk because they're not in the programs.
So I think
They're not.
reaching out, like Tom said, if you're reaching outside of just the competitive sports and you're reaching out to activities, that when he's talking about 60%, I mean, that really expands when you include band and drama and debate.
Mm-hmm.
Those are big groups. And just band itself is almost 100 kids. So, when you start expanding out there, you're gonna see a larger group of the population. So my only concern was just where was the focus of, as far as the amount. I will say I agree, because I use it all the time when I see kids for pre-expulsionary hearings, that I put it into a contract, random drug testing. And that's an agreement, because when when we see them for a pre-expulsionary hearing, we're one of the few districts that has that process, we're giving them the opportunity not to go to the board for an expulsion hearing based on what they're agreeable to do and to meet. So we can put them on a contract for random drug testing, and the argument I always use is, look, make me the bad guy. So that you can tell your friends, it's me that's causing you not to use. Mr. Blackman is looking over your shoulder, make me the bad guy. I'm fine with it. But I always tell them I'm trying to empower you. I'm trying to give you the ability to make a decision to say exactly what you guys stated, to say no. Because peer pressure is very real, and it's I mean, that's what these kids live under every day as teenagers. That's the most important thing in their lives, is their peer pressure. You talk about the brain development, it's the hippocampus, which is the emotional center. That's what their lives are about. You want to see drama? Go to the high school.
Okay, thank you, John. We're running short on time, and I want everyone to be able to comment. So, Mr. Schoen, if you could please identify yourself.
Yes, Larry Schoen. I'm Blaine County Commissioner and member of the Drug Coalition Governing Board. Both Mr. Bates and Mr. Blackman have really touched on the 2 key questions that we are asking you throughout this entire presentation. And so I want to remind you that we're asking you to think not just about the direct effects of any individual program that's being presented, like drug testing, whether it's for whatever, in whatever venue, but the indirect effects. What we on the governing board really believe in is that we fundamentally believe that we can change the culture in this valley and in this community around drug use. So all of the statistics you'll see have to do not just with the use of drugs and alcohol, but the acceptance of the use of drugs and alcohol. And so if you reach 60%, you're going to change. It's not just the 60% you reach. You're changing the culture. You are reaching beyond just the individual program of IDEFI, of extracurricular with drug testing. That is really fundamentally what we believe in. What we're asking you is, are you willing to take the steps to participate in changing the culture in this community around the acceptance of youth drug and alcohol use? That's really the key idea underlying the work of this coalition.
Thank you. David?
And I was just going to say, when you do the drug testing, when something does come up positive, it's a wonderful opportunity to say, this is a prevention now. Now this is a way to intercede in that and do counseling and really get that kid some help. You don't just wait around until all of a sudden it turns into a huge issue and now that kid has nowhere to turn. It really gives them an opportunity to be like, if it's not as punitive and actually an opportunity to intervene, then you can really help these kids get on the right track again. So that's why it's another really positive aspect in the drug testing in schools.
Thank you. I'd like to say that Tommy Bailey Jr. has gone back to school.
Yeah, the class,
There's no excuse. Anyway, I have a lot of respect for the 100 kids that participate in the IDEFI program. And, you know, they're leaders. And they're the type of kids we want as leaders in our schools, okay? And I think just personally, as a show of support and a show of respect for them, I'll take a drug test, random drug test, anytime you want, okay? And since you're the guy that does it, you just let me know. Give me a little advance notice for that.
Drink some water.
Yeah, but anyway, I'm serious about that. Anytime.
To bring the specimen to you.
Okay.
Since you mentioned Tommy, for those of you that may or may not have been, we had that eye-to-eye night at the middle school. It was a fantastic night. They brought a speaker in from IDEFI, and then parents attended. And then they brought up a panel of students and community members, and they were asking questions of them about the situations and about their approach. And they had Tommy and a number of other high school athletes and non-athletes up there on the stage, and they were asking them, their opinions. And one of the strongest things that came out of that was they want drug testing. And I think a lot of the parents in the audience were kind of amazed at that they said they do not feel like, because kids are pretty black and white. They're like, hey, there's a problem, why don't you fix it? And it's like, we know that kids are doing it. We know kids are doing it at school. We know kids are doing it on the weekends. Why don't you fix it? Because, that's how kids are. They're very black and white in that arena. Everybody knows what's going on, and they don't get caught up in all the politics like adults do. And they were just like, we support it, we do it in IDEFI, and we don't see the problem. And if a kid wants to object to it, then to us that's a huge red flag. Any kid that says, no, I don't want to take the test, to them, this is what they were saying, to them, that was a huge red flag. Because why wouldn't you? If you're clean, why wouldn't you? And the reason that drug testing works for them is nobody wants to get busted. Nobody wants to get busted. So if they know they're getting drug tested and they say to their peers, I can't because I'm going to be drug tested, everybody understands that. It's real simple. Oh yeah, okay, you're getting, either you're on probation, my parents are doing it for whatever reason, I can't. And they understand that. That's their vernacular. No one wants to get busted. They understand that. And that's why it gives them that strong out. It gives them a way to say, I can go to the party, but I don't have to participate in that avenue of it because I know I'm going to get tested. They understand that, and that's their way out. And that was the message that came across from that panel of high school. Most of them were seniors or juniors. And the parents, I think, really were huge in that aspect of support. But the other thing I wanted to say is that, this is just one piece. I think, Terry alluded to it. We need counseling, obviously. We need to build mentorship. We need to move in all different areas in order to eradicate the problem. You can't just do, if we stop the run, they're going to throw the bomb. If we stop the pass, they're going to go run. So you have to attack it from all avenues. You can't just say drug testing is not the end-all, do-all. All right?
Tom,
and we understand.
Catherine has a question.
Okay, I have a few that I've written down here. I guess the first one goes back to Jay's slide here, and that these other school districts have started the drug testing, and I'm wondering if there's been conversations with these districts about, was there community pushback? Was the community involved in this? Was it a supportive community?
Yeah, I talked to each one of those school districts, sometimes just through the office personnel, principal, athletic director. What was interesting, all wanted to talk about it, all wanted to show us this call back if you get that far, if you want to put a policy together, you're welcome to look
Right.
at ours. And the question I had, what kind of pushback did you have? All 5 of those, 0.
And when did these schools, is
They're all
recent?
within the last few years.
Last few years? We all know that we sort of have a different community up here. And this is just a thought that it might be, we would want the community to be supportive of this, and that, maybe it's a town hall meeting.
That's why I asked that question, what was the pushback like? And
Right.
it was really minimal.
So that was the first thing. Then the second thing is, again, what we've already touched on is, how do we target the other 40% of the kids? And I know this has been done before, but drug dogs, parking lot, drug dogs going through the parking lots, the schools, and is that an effective way to reduce? I mean, that's one of our jobs, is to keep drugs out of the schools. Or Lynn or Terry or...
I think, I would say, I'm sorry, Lynn, go ahead. I was just going to say, I think back to the comment that Larry Schoen made, it really is about changing the culture, and that is, John Key, the outgoing CEO of the hospital, made a statement that will always stick with me. He said, culture eats strategy. So this is not simple work. It does take a multifaceted, patient, long-term approach, and I think we need to be smart about all these different things we can do, the programs, the different policy pieces in the community. One of the things that I think is really important to remind the community of is it's so great of you all and the audience to take the time to be here today, but this is not a school issue. A lot of times it gets pegged as, well, that's the school's got a drug problem. The school doesn't have a drug problem, the community has a drug problem. And so we have to figure out collectively how to look at policies so that we're trying to and educate parents that unhealthy modeling at home, 3, 4, 5 drinks in a setting in front of your kids is not okay. It's not healthy. We live in a resort community. We're not unlike other resort communities. We are a little bit different, and these challenges are greater because of that. But they can be done, but it has to be through all of these different things. And I think that culture, if we have, get a big group of kids that just decide, it is okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's healthy, and I want to go on with my life. I want all of my brain to be really capable to figure out what I want to do with my life. When that culture establishes itself in the schools, and I'm a believer we can do it. It won't happen next year. It won't happen the year after, but we can start to move that trend, and I think with IDEFI and other things we already are, we can get there. So that 40%, I think, can be heavily influenced by all of those strategies and by that culture.
Terry, thank you very much. We are short on time now.
Okay.
Can we just, Lynn, can we just have Lynn respond to that for 2 seconds?
I was just going to make a suggestion that we really have 2 things going on right now at the high school level that are privileges, and not rights. And that is being allowed to leave campus as a junior and senior, and also being able to drive on campus. And one of you guys alluded to that. And to me, those are privileges. I mean, we want to encourage extracurricular activities, absolutely, because what Mr. Blacksburg said, Mr. Blackburn, I'm sorry, it's a habit, has always is absolutely right. The more they participate in extracurricular, the longer better chance you're going to have they're going to finish school. However, the open campus and the driving on campus, those 2 are purely privileges. And to me, that might be a good starting point, because it's always been a concern of mine. You have kids that leave, don't come back, and I don't think that just happens at Silver Creek. I'm sure it happens at a lot of places. And maybe that would be a good place to start, that if you're going to bring your car on campus, or if you're going to leave as part of that 11th or 12th grade privilege, then that's a contract, and you are subject to random drug testing. Just a thought.
Thank you.
And lastly, I know we've got to go, but just the
Yep.
protocol and policy, we would love to work with you. We definitely have some ideas if it's something that you want to move forward with. It's just, it's an epidemic rate almost, and if this was influenza or something else, I think we'd look and go, stop the presses. We've got to figure something out here. And so we invite you and hope that you'll work with us, and you certainly have been. We appreciate it, and we're here to help in any way we can.
Yeah, I want to thank the entire board of the Drug Coalition and staff. I know the work you do is very, very important, and you know that you've got supporters here in regards to the school district. So, thank you very much, Terry.
Thanks, you guys.